We now come to our sequel number 77 of the Church of Uganda at 150, celebrating our church and the state. In today's sequel, St. John's Entebbe gets a name. Earlier it was just a chapel, but now it has a name in 1909. Then there is that permanent representative, the Assistant Commissioner, George Wilson Tayari, finally goes home. But there are some things that are going to surprise us about him. And then this great writer, the Reverend Roscoe, also retires. Welcome. I'm Christopher Amos Chikomeko Ntambi, the author. And so let us begin. At the Marine School Entebbe, that is where the Entebbe Chapel had been built from as early as 1901. You remember the first ever missionary priest at that Marine School, the Entebbe Chapel, was the Reverend John Jamesine Willis, who had been transferred from Ankole. And all along, there had been several priests because, remember, Willis was transferred to Kavirondo. And other priests were being appointed to carry on the chapel work for the European community in Entebbe. And so, for all those years up to 1909, the Marine School at Entebbe had been hosting the Entebbe Chapel. But now, on the 10th of April 1909, the chapel was transformed into a church, and it was formally named St. John the Evangelist. And on that day, it was consecrated, the 10th of April 1909, by Bishop Alfred Tucker. Also present was Archdeacon of Uganda, the Venerable Herbert Walker, who in fact preached. Now, in that year, the priest who had been posted and the transiting priest from a Marine School chapel in Entebbe to a full recognized St. John's Chapel or church, St. John the Evangelist Church, was the Reverend J. E. M. Huntington. Any relationship with the fallen bishop? No. The current geographical location of St. John the Evangelist Church today is not, I repeat, the current geographical location of St. John the Evangelist today is not the original Marine School Entebbe Chapel. No, it is not. Yeah? That is important to note, but as the sequels continue, we shall see what happened and how come St. John now belongs to a new, or to a separate, completely separate geographical location. How did that happen? We shall see all that in future sequels. Now, the governor, Sir Hesketh Bell, retired in 1909. Also, at the same time, his own assistant, the Assistant Commissioner, George Wilson Tayari, also retired. They actually left on the same day. They left Uganda on the 1st of March, 1909. Tayari surprised everybody. He left his son, Edward Wilson, and he left him with the family of Stanley Chitaka. The family of Stanley Chitaka was related to Zakaria Kizito Kisingiri, the regent. Zakaria Kizito Kisingiri, the regent, had a son called Stanley Chitaka, and in that home, that is where Edward Wilson was left, the son of George Wilson Tayari. I think he wanted to have a permanent domicile in Uganda, and maybe as even he left, maybe he had plans that he would return, although he never did. He actually died in 1943, aged around 81 years, at Tunbridge Wells in UK. However, his son, Edward Wilson, is the one who therefore became a complete Ugandan, is the one who got assimilated into Kitaka's clan, and for those of you who know this family, the Wilsons, will bear witness that they have since become the Wilsons of Uganda. And Edward grew up, he married a local girl, and he had 7 children. Now, the most famous one of all Edward's children is the fallen Reverend John Wilson of the Anglican Communion. And why is he famous? Because he was once upon a time the head of the Africa Evangelistic Enterprise, and he headed that organization for a long time. Now, one of Tayari's only a daughter. Tayari had only one daughter, and that daughter married into the fallen Charles Stokes extended family. So the Charles Stokes and the Wilsons became cousins because of that marriage. And so we shall see more of these families. They are half-caste families of Uganda. And basically now I'm trying to show you how come they are part of Uganda, how come they are part of Buganda Kingdom, in clans named after our own Buganda society names. So much for the retirement of the two. Let us now visit Kavirondo. In January 1909, Kavirondo became an archdeaconry. Remember, the Reverend John Willis had been posted there in 1905, but now 4 years later, he had grown the place so well that it became an archdeaconry, and he became the first archdeacon appointed by Bishop Tucker. And this Kavirondo area covered the whole of Luo land, the whole of Luya land, the whole of Gusi, or the Abagusi people in Kisii, and they occupied a territory in the east and the northeast of Lake Victoria. Willis, he was a very young priest by that time. He was 36 years. He had not yet married, so you could see the energy. He had no family attachments to keep him or to hold him, and he was therefore always on the move. And you see how he was able to grow this area into a very strong church, one of the pillars of the Church of Kavirondo. And he was able to learn Luo, he was able to learn Luya. Remember, he had also very good command of not very good, but he had a small command of the Ankole language where he had come from. He had picked a few here in Buganda, although later on we know that he became so fluent in Luganda, because as we shall see in future sequels, he became somebody very, very, very big within the Uganda diocese. So Willis was taught these languages by two gentlemen. One was called Yona Orao, and the other one was called Anubi. Therefore, we can comfortably say that by 1909, the Diocese of Uganda, or the Uganda Diocese, had 2 archdeacons. There was an archdeacon of the entire diocese at Namirembe, Herbert Walker, and now there was an archdeacon at Kavirondo. And later on, we are going to see more archdeacons for Ngora, for Busoga, for Western Uganda, for Gahini. All those ones will come in later. But for now, we only have, that is 1909, we only have Kavirondo and the whole of Uganda. Then the Reverend Kiching, who was at Ngora, got very busy with the Ateso alphabet grammar handbook. He was trying to develop the Ateso language by creating a grammar book so that the language could be taught in schools and they could learn to write Ateso, read and write it. So he's the one who developed the first ever Ateso alphabet grammar handbook, and he completed it in 1909. So that is one of the legacies of the Reverend Kiching, who we shall see also in the future becoming more and more important in the Diocese of Uganda and rising higher and higher and higher. Lastly, the Reverend John Roscoe. He left in 1909. He had been at Namirembe Station with other priests like Ernest Miller and W.B. Gill. All those were priests. Now, John Roscoe had arrived in 1884, the year in which Mutesa the First died. And during his stay, he made extensive research on the Buganda customs and rituals and their way of life. And he wrote a book. The book is called The Buganda. It was an account of their native customs and beliefs. This book was published much later in 1911, but he went with the manuscript on his retirement in 1909. He left and he got it published in the UK. Roscoe had been born in 1861, and he lived a long life, dying in 1932. He was a civil engineer, and I think that scientific background of his gave him the ability to write what I prefer to call the anatomy of the Buganda culture. The only book which is in English, not written by a Ugandan, which dissects the body of the Buganda's culture, it was written by this man. And that book, the Buganda, he writes on the Buganda culture on birth, the Buganda culture and rituals on childhood, the Buganda culture on marriage. What do the Buganda do when it comes to sickness? What do the Buganda do when it comes to death and burial? What do the Buganda do as far as family is concerned? The Buganda clans, the Buganda totems, the Buganda kabakas, the Buganda governance, the Buganda religion, the Buganda warfares of the past, the Buganda work, the Buganda animal husbandry and farming and hunting, the Buganda water wells, the Buganda folklore, folk tales. My goodness, the book is so rich. It is available in main libraries. Makerere has plenty of these textbooks, and many libraries in Great Britain, even in Kenya, at the University of Nairobi, they have these particular books of Roscoe. Why do I call them books? Apart from the Buganda, he also wrote his own memoirs, and it is called 25 Years in East Africa. That one, he published it in 1921, because I told you he died in 1932. Now, he believed in the scientific study of Africans, and having done so, he documented it. Very brave man. And so the Native Anglican Church celebrates him 150 years later by saying that the Reverend John Roscoe, bravo, engineer, bravo, engineer. As a matter of fact, hooray, hooray, hooray. And that ends our 77th sequel. May the good Lord bless us all.